And here we are. Hello, everybody. A little late, but here anyway. What would our 50th episode be without technical issues? But here we are. Today we're going to talk about Beta 1 scenarios and tester Burnout. We have with us, of course, the usual crew, along with special guest Sacrix, who is, I guess, probably the most or one of the most active and long-term CU testers that they've got. Welcome.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Sacrix with a Y. We're just going to go right into this. We're running a little bit late, but thanks everybody for hanging out. I will save my usual introductions to the end. Usually I like to start with a couple of softballs to warm us up. So just for everybody, one thing that I was interested in is how do you do, since the topic is really looking at burnout and different testing scenarios, how do you think you do with long-term testing, alpha and beta testing in MMOs?
How do we do personally?
Mm-hmm.
I've done rather well in the last couple of let's say the span of 5 years. The last couple games that have gone into beta testing, I've not been burnt out too much on it, limiting kind of my play with it to just occasional, rather than going all out in it.
Yeah, I've done about the same. The only game I've gone a bit too much into was ESO, but that was because I was the crafting officer, and I kind of tried to grind the crafting as much as I could to do the guides and everything. But for the most part, I try to put a bit of space of time between my testing phases. So when I know it's mostly stability phases, I will just log in for like a few minutes, do a bit of testing, and then log out. Not try to go for the length, but just going for the goals. But for the most part, I try to avoid trying to play the game during the beta, basically. So I've not done too bad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much similar. I don't think I get that burned out. I mean, I think I've tested way too much, to be honest. In these past games, Warhammer, I mean, internal beta, in with Guild Wars 2 internal, playing with me guild with groups in internal testings. But generally, I find out like what the specs are, the builds and things like that. So I do play the game, but I generally don't hardcore it 24/7. I'll maybe play a couple of times a week, 30 minutes, an hour at a time, and I'll generally suss out where the game is. And I'm usually quite well at adapting to when is actually a good time to come back and test the game before it actually launches, so you don't burn out as quickly.
Yeah, I have problems. not with short-term testing, but long-term testing, I sometimes have issues really sticking through with it. But it depends a little bit for me on the different types of testing and the options that are available and how far along, especially when we're in the like the early, like alpha testing, when there's not a lot of systems and things in there. It gets very difficult for me to do it too frequently. Like, I can get into like the test where you're trying to stress test or you're trying to do bug testing for half an hour or an hour once. You do it like every single week, I have trouble motivating myself to get in. So what would you say are your favorite types of testing to do?
Oh boy. I like break the build tests, not in the CSE sense where they just open up the servers, everyone come on and play at least what is in the game, but where there's actually defined criteria of you're in a very small portion of what is available to the game, and we want you to do everything you can to absolutely crash this thing. I remember some instances in SWTOR where I know our whole community got some beta invites to play, and there were times where they asked us to go into specific like war zones to play and attempt to break the war zones, and that was really fun for me because you got to play at least part of it, but then also do everything you could to upset the developers at the same time.
I think it's pretty straightforward for me. It's going to be PvP all the time. Just generally finding the community within the testers, not specifically having the game or the devs tell you what to do within it. Just basically fighting between the enemies within the test and finding like friends or whoever's in there with like another guild. I think that's sorely misunderused in some of these testings. I think solo people and stuff are good at finding bugs, but you definitely need more groups and more guilds when you come to this type of testing later on down the line. But generally, I mean, like these break the build tests, I mean, I must have been in about 500 of them, and they definitely get tedious after a while.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's see.
that's always the problem. Yeah.
Chat, we got breaking abilities. Always, it is always fun to actually find something that's not working and be able to report it.
Yeah.
Testing for the deep dark forest, the cool ambient VFX. For me, it's actually, and this, I don't know, this won't surprise. It may amuse Brand. For me, it's exploration and finding, finding areas that aren't working correctly, finding areas where I get clipped into the map and can't move anymore. Which is funny because I have a notorious history with this in post-launch as well, getting into just finding anything you can clip into and get stuck in. I will find it, and I will be stuck there in a table going, why?
And Warhammer was painful for that. Any little thing you clipped on in Warhammer in the beta, literally kill yourself.
Star Wars: The Old Republic. Tables. I just,
yes,
for some reason, I was always like, I'm going to jump over the table.
Land right in it.
I can't move. As well with the stories, when they didn't finish the stories off, and it would like crash in the middle of the quest.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then it'd have like some hair cut in. That was pretty funny.
So, getting off some of the softballs a bit and talking about these scenarios. There are a lot of different scenarios that they identified that we will either have or probably have for the beta testing, identified in the Beta 1 doc. We've got siege battles, caravan escort, three-sided place of power battles, three-sided castle battles, within mine, some sort of three-realm Thunderdome arena type fight, hide-and-seek battles in the deeper, darker forests, and of course, just general free-for-alls. So,
and not to mention picking up flowers.
And picking up flowers. So, what would you say? Which of these would you say you're looking forward to the most in testing, and why?
I think that for me, it's because it's part of my interest in the game. It would be the caravan conflicts or the castle smash, because that's two of the things I will get involved into. And the caravan attacks are actually one of the mechanics I'm really looking forward to. So being able to test those to make them the most fun, engaging, challenging they can be on both sides. That's something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I'd say the same, but I'd mainly say all of them. I mean, I want to test most of them, but mainly the PvP, Deathmatch, King of the Hill. I'd also like to see them do more variations of scenarios. One where you go in with crafters, you have to defend the crafters and then build the keep in the middle, and then it's defended versus the other two realms, things
that
along
would be
those
fun.
lines. Because I mean, they are going to have to work in. If that's the thing, if they're going to go away from the large overworld and focus on the scenarios and build the systems within the scenarios, they're going to have to make scenarios like this to cater to the crafters and the builders, or what the hell are they going to be doing? We could be in beta 1 and in these scenarios for years. I mean, who knows how long they're going to last?
Would be nice to get more crafting.
We're going to have to accompany them in scenarios.
I have two in particular I really want to see a lot of. The first one being the mines, because it's the Thunderdome, the last team out wins kind of thing, and that's really going to start to push the view of team play versus the free-for-alls or just the open world siege castles, where you can still go off on your own and still kind of do some stuff, but that really kind of pushes that team play, and I want to see how that's going to evolve. And then the free-for-all I want to see as well, because I want to see how limited the 1v1 option will be for all the classes as it comes out, just so that people can start to see, hopefully, that it's not a viable source of PvP. but just to see how it balances with that as well.
No, you bring up a very good point. I mean, I don't necessarily subscribe the way that when they're putting in these scenarios and they're moving away from the overworld, especially for Beta 1, the whole balance element, yes, you could say if they bring it back later for Beta 3 when all the classes are in, but it's not really going to help that much with balance early on. So you're probably right, having the more caravan oriented ones that defend the keep, the more kind of boring ones, at least for me, anyways.
Objective ones.
Yeah.
Until at least Beta 2 or whatever. Hopefully there
Well-
will be more. There'll be another thing as well that they'll focus on. Break the build will be the ones that they have bots and NPCs with, and then they'll also have tests where there's not bots because they can get tedious at times when it's just all out
Yes.
bots. I'd like to have some actual focus on combat, the
Mhm.
synergy, and basically the general 3 classes that are going to be in for Beta 1, not messing about bloody doing PV all the time.
Mhm.
Well, what I like in what Brand said also about the Thunderdome style would be later down the road on beta, CSC asking 3 guilds, established guilds, one from each realm, actually doing a sort of competition, starting to establish the rivalries and seeing how a structured guild or group operates. As you said, Sacrex, seeing the real synergy in terms of strategy, not just in terms of balance, class per class, pound per pound, basically.
No, I mean, you're preaching to the choir here. I've been saying that for years. That's
Yeah.
that's what I wanted for IT, not just for the general testing. If they see an organised guild, a group, bring them into the IT, more the better, because down the line, when it comes to balance, one person can go in and they can find the really obvious broken stuff per class and they can find bugs, but they're not really going to be well coordinated together. And
Mhm.
metrics only get you so far. You want to be testing, like I say, with them organized as possible. And some people will say, well, that just skews the thing. But I mean, anything that's balanced at that level is going to be balanced in general for most of the player base. Whereas if you go and the problem is usually that they'll finish up the game, it won't be balanced, and then they'll basically try to fix the broken shit that they should have fixed prior in the first 3 months of the game. And I'm holding Mark to that he's not going to do that.
Hopefully you will. We'll see.
Hopefully. For me, I kind of fit with Swazi and everybody else, I guess, that one of the main ones I want to see are the siege battles. In large part for me, because I want to see the testing of group coordination in large scale setting. How do the groups work with the pug players playing in as well? How do they ignore them or actually capitalize on them? What are the effects, as you mentioned, of having the organized groups versus gameplay with less organized groups? But also, what I'm really interested in seeing is kind of the hide and seek mode with the deeper, darker forest. One, because I just really like the deeper, darker forest biomes. But also because a part of the reason I like them is because I think it'll lead to some very interesting smaller group play. The different groups maneuvering through these these deeper, darker areas and trying to find other groups, and it'll give them some interesting things that test that they might not get in some of the other scenarios. Which leads me to my next question, which is, what are some interesting bits of data and things that you think CSE might get from some of these specific scenarios outside of the obvious, just working on testing class abilities and such?
Well, some of them are going to loosely translate into the live version. The popular pop scenario, Place of Powers, is basically going to be the modern Friday night fights or Saturday night, not Saturday night siege, but basically the modern Friday night fights.
Yeah.
But it's going to also simulate a real world scenario in 3 realms trying to vie for a place of power. I can see that at least providing some sort of data on how the place of power itself works, in bonuses to those who control it, things of that nature. But really, I think all of these just boil down to just they're trying to give us a fun way to play while they collect the normal metrics, and there's not really much beyond that.
I do
I'd have
think
to pretty much agree with what Brand said. It's the main objective of this is fun, because like we saw in the pre-alpha, it was fun. Then they went to the normal sized map and it just wasn't as fun. There wasn't as many people logging on. I mean, things kind of have stood still for about 3 years, and we are kind of going back to the pre-alpha times of the scenarios. But It's definitely the best thing they could have done, because like if you look at I wouldn't necessarily say I subscribe to the fact that it's going to make the game come out faster. It will help them in certain areas that they
Hmm.
will be able to use things again of that nature, but they're still going to be having to build all the tools, the assets for
Yes.
each certain section. Whereas if you look at Crowfall, they obviously they've got the engine, they've got the assets. Just to bring that up, because they've got the same problem right now with their testing phase that they're in with the large world. They obviously had the Hunger Dome, it worked well. You had the gear, the looting system to get the gear and things of that nature. Basically, it progressed the combat. Whereas then they went to the larger world now, when it's pretty bad. And I think CSE are going to have to look at countering that down the line. And
Yeah,
hopefully that'll be
but
the one thing that'll come to, is that they will eventually be able to adapt for what people like in these scenarios, that they'll be able
yes.
to have more of them. If some people are more bored, maybe they'll run two at a time for different ones. If they've got the population, that is, who knows?
Yeah, there are some things
Um,
that I think will definitely be able to be garnered from some of these. For instance, the forest scenario again. I think that will be much more apt for testing things like player collision, when you've got all these trees around, you've got much more confined spaces. The open siege battles, I mean, you're still going to have player collision, but you're not going to have to worry as much about shooting and projectile collision with trees and other things. So I do think there are some
Camouflage.
elements like that, as well as movement over terrain. There may or may not have been some issues with that in various points of testing, when you try to walk up something and like,
maybe,
this doesn't work very well. Um,
maybe.
and I think those are some elements that they might glean some useful information, but also be able to tweak and test some things over time with the force testing, outside of just fumbling around in the dark.
Yeah, I think they'll also get the more general overall view of how each race is going to play. Like the Vikings with the more damage, faster attack. This will obviously come when more classes go in. The
Hmm.
TDD, like you've said, the guerrilla style in the forest with the forest traps, different areas for what will work better with each of the races. The Arthurians maybe more stalwart in the keep, defending positions, long range, people trying to attack. Hopefully, we'll start seeing some siege towers and things of this nature. What I am looking forward to, hopefully, that is going to be something that'll be in this game. Will be more of a fast attacking type siege.
Yeah.
Hmm.
For me, most of those scenarios, it's not just the extra data or the smaller data. Contrary to what Sakrik said, I think it has those scenarios will have a huge impact in, if they successful, will have a huge impact in how fast the game comes out. Because if they're fun and they draw testers in the test,
Oh,
there is much more chances of finding bugs for them to fix faster, helping the game coming faster. That's not so much the small unexpected data that I'm looking forward to, is those scenarios making the testing more fun and engaging, and drawing more testers in to find more bugs faster and helping the game come out faster.
No, no, I agree to an extent. The whole fun element and making it so that it's more structured, and
hmm.
they obviously are going to use this stuff again, maybe for events down the line, bringing
Yeah.
it back later for balancing in beta 3, etc. But it's generally that they have spent a lot of the time. So far, it's around about 6 to 7 months, if my memory is correct from what I'm looking for, and then we're still not anywhere near beta. And then we go into beta 1 phase. I mean, how long is this going to last? It could be beta 1, beta 2, and then they've still got a lot of work to do with the overworld RVR. The cube is miles behind. The crafting, like yourself, if you want to do crafting, that's barely been even started. Stabilizers, moving maps, roads. I mean, there's so many systems. If you watch the BSC days, it gives you so much in depth that there is a long way to go before this game comes out.
I do think the heavy focus of fighting in these scenarios is hopefully going to help them figure out the pacing of combat with all their abilities and classes earlier rather than later, so that they have the chance to
Yeah, I
have
agree. That's where the classes
Ben.
need to be in as fast as possible.
Yeah,
My opinion. Like the three you're going to go in with, they might then. I mean, I'm wondering how they're actually going to do it. They put the three in the basic, the ability builder system needs a hell of a lot of work. They did the whole rehabilitation, but the front end is pretty whack right now. They've even stopped using it for a bit, and they're giving more people their predefined sets. So how in depth will they go with making the three archetypes like the healer, the archer, and the heavy fighter, how in depth will they be before they put the next classes in? I'm hoping that they won't go too in depth. They'll go to a certain level, and then they'll add
I
the
hope so
sword
too.
and the mage after, and then the crafter will be coming along the way, and then hopefully we'll get some more melee in before.
I'm hoping
because-
they're gonna test the bases first,
yeah, definitely.
seeing how the interactions work within all of the elements of the skills, and then start adding the other classes.
Yeah, but I
And
mean,
it's also gonna make the scenarios more interesting, because if you have only 3 classes on each side, it is not as interesting as if you have mages, as if you have most classes actually in. If you just have one heavy fighter, one healer, and one archer, um, that limits also the type of strategy you can do in those scenarios.
It's not just strategies; it's just general gameplay. It's going to be kind of boring. I mean, you've only got one. You're only going to have one melee for a long time within the period on the heavy fighter, and then there'll be people waiting to play certain melees. There'll be so many melees, and then that's going to be a problem. They need the classes in faster so you can get the overall synergy. Because if you just wait to go to beta 2 and then they add 2 more classes, then the whole synergy is going to change with only the 3 classes, then the 2 that's added. And then if you throw in 2 more later on towards the start of beta 3, say, that's going to change the whole picture again in the whole balance. Every class that's added is basically going to change the synergy and the balance of the game, basically.
It's like doing the work 3 times.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and I agree with
suspect
what you said
they're,
about the basics, so they don't fall for the same problem they've had. But I still would like to see unique mechanics in for each class fairly fast, so you can get an overall view of what the class is going to feel like. So it's not just a bog standard archetype, really, because that's been one of my complaints so far. That the 3 heavy fighters, not the healers, are good. They're more. Obviously the stone healer plays very different to what the Arthurian physician does, and can't really remember the name of the blooming healer now.
The empath.
The empath, yes. Obviously, you're healing yourself with your own blood, and they play very differently. The aesthetics as well, they feel differently. But with the archer, it's like they've got the very similar skills. They feel very similar. The melee fighters as well right now, the thematics and the feeling just feel very, very similar. And that needs to be worked on before beta 1, because people will soon get bored of that, because it'll just feel like they're playing the same class, basically.
I do get the feeling, and seeing the state of the game and what it's in. Beta 1, it's gonna be like a beta test, but it's still not really like a full game test. They won't have all the classes in. They won't have anywhere near all the classes in. For me, it's almost like it seems to be more that they're aiming towards beta 2 really being the evolution point into something where they can test real game kind of balance and everything. I'm hoping that at least by the start of beta 2, they would have maybe not all, but a majority of the launch classes in some capacity into the test. Because if they don't, then I would share at that point. I would share concerns about testing the balance and everything, because then you're going to start really testing it, and as you said, you're going to have to just kind of redo it as we go into it. Because beta 1's probably going to be the longest phase.
There is a lot of important stuff, like you say, with the crafters. We need to know information about the crafters. How many crafters? You're laughing, but I'm being serious. I need to recruit these for my guild. And I mean,
he's not laughing. He's smiling internally.
When you've got a hardcore combat guild, it's hard to find these type of guys to come along with you. It's like a totally different atmosphere within the guild. Like
I'm not laughing at what you say. I'm laughing because that's pretty much what I've been saying for a while now.
Obviously, we've got Necro. It's hard to find these builders with the cube that's a long way back. But the crafters you're going to need with the time gated crafting, how many crafters are you going to need for your guild,
and the crafters evolution also.
How fast the thing's going to break. This type of thing we're going to need, and we're going to need to know early. And there's been way too little for my liking on that so far. Mark needs to. He's been saying we're going to get this crafting thing for years now.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I'm laughing because you, as you said earlier, you're preaching at the choir, because I've been saying that for the last few weeks. The lack of information on crafters has been one of my main topic of discussion with Brand and Vellic.
I know. No, we agree on a lot. We agree on a lot of
Yeah,
that stuff as well, especially the stuff you said. I think it was there two casts
mhm,
ago,
yeah,
just about the general information that CSE put out.
mhm,
It's like I said, it's fluff. Some of the substance is meh. Like the only really people I even care about is talking when Ben talks, because that's the real information you're getting. The rest of the time, I mean, obviously I like Mark as a designer, but
yeah,
sometimes it's just too much PR, and he answers questions like 50 different ways, so he kind of covers himself in the long run, so you never really know where things stand, which kind of gets tedious as well after you've been interested in the project for a long time. But Mark knows I feel that way, anyways. We've talked about this
yeah.
before.
But
Oh yes, you
hopefully,
have.
I think also it's something we covered also in the previous. I think it's the cast you're talking about. Is that there's also a lot more. And as a mod on the Discord, I can tell you for sure, we've got a lot more people coming in that have no clue about the game, that just discovered it with the announcement, especially the announcement of the investment. So that's also something that is interesting for the scenarios, because the scenarios are going to be the platform on which most of those people who have no clue of what CU really is, they haven't followed the game in a long time, or they just backed the Kickstarter and completely forgot about the game for the longest time,
Yeah,
and
yeah. I
they're
mean,
just now rediscovering it. So those scenarios are going to be their introduction. So they need to be at least worked on. I think that's why they're spending so much time on those scenarios, is because that's going to be the first time most people will get a hand on the game.
Mm-hmm.
And if people say the problem is they've talked about that for at length, about the misuse of the term beta, but people will get in and expect to have gameplay
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's
expect
true.
to do stuff.
and to back up to what you were saying, I mean, I get to be fair to Mark, he's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, in terms of giving
Yeah,
out
of course.
information, because then people are like saying, well, you're
True.
not saying anything. I just more prefer it maybe if it went to like a monthly thing.
Mm.
But like I agree with what you were saying though about the beta. It's important, but for anyone coming in new, it kind of annoys me like when they say read the foundation principles. Yes and no. It's kind of, some of them are like they're not really relevant anymore. I would say more to watch the BSC days, which is by far the best thing that
That was
CSC's done.
yeah.
Like if you want design and depth of like systems and where they're going with the game for combat and ideas, you need to watch the BSC days. And there's probably a hell of a lot of people in the community that haven't even watched that. Some of the long hardened
Mm-hmm.
backers probably haven't even watched them,
Mm.
and they need to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because it would help a lot with their debating some of these people.
Speaking of the scenarios, there is a certain level of concern about them spending too much time designing the scenarios themselves. But are there any particular scenarios that, or types of scenarios that they haven't listed, that you think might be interesting or useful to have in the beta one to help vary things up or to get interesting data?
We mentioned the crafting
Crafting.
thing already. That I think that I agree wholeheartedly with that. That's
Yeah.
a neat thing. I'd like some depths scenarios to go in
No,
early on.
no chance. Get out.
Yeah.
Screw the depths. Honestly, that's
At this point, I don't know if depths are even going to make it in the game.
like I
Yeah,
don't know if
Yeah.
that was more of a joke.
I don't know if you were going to bring this up or not, but it's not just all the problems you have with betas and people getting burned out and this and nature. I actually made a post on the forum about this because my argument was basically soft launch versus long beta phase, and
Yeah.
it's not just, it's like a content drought. You've already seen the content, you've been playing the game for a long time, so by the time it comes out, you kind of need that after the first month, the 2 month, you need that hit like they do where they release not really an expansion but a little game update, a balance update in that second month,
The
and it'll like
extender packs.
it'll freshen up the game. Whereas I think they should definitely do the depths in that time because it fits more in line with. I mean, there's going to be so much stuff you need to do in the overworld. You've got your the crafting. You're going to be need to building your own houses, taking care of your islands, building your weapons. Then you've got
I
the
don't
spec
expect
line.
people in the depth
Progression.
for weeks,
Exactly.
if not months.
3 to 4 months at least. I mean, especially with a gig like mine, I'm wanting to be going there the first possible
Yeah.
time, and I know that there's going to be a hell of a lot more stuff that you're going to need to do, which is more important than going to the depths. And as we've also been told in the last couple of streams, it's only really going to be for durability anyways. So is it really going to be that that worth it, really.
Yeah.
Because
I
it
would
really
like
is just a scenario with a forge and a mine, and that's one
Right.
thing I usually argue with these people, because they're always saying, "Oh, we don't want end game scenarios because they take away from the overworld population." But I
Okay.
mean, I'm pro scenarios. I want scenarios for the end game, not for rewards, but
Mm-hmm.
for just general like flexibility, so that
Right.
it's not that you're breaking up the monotony. You're not playing
Mm-hmm.
24/7, because even though CU is going to have a great system what propels the combat and the catalyst to promote combat, with the builders giving them the stuff, then the crafters making breaking items and stuff like that, it will still get tedious, because the map pieces on the outside fascial layer, they might look different on each server, but the general landmass is going to be the same. Maybe there won't be
Yeah.
buildings in the same place. So one, you might have played months and you'll know a certain guild. You're like, oh, we like fighting them on Vikings. We fought them here yesterday. We fought them there. And over the months, or maybe you're a solo, you've got a nice little path or a gang spot, you know, all the caravans travel through, and you've been there doing that for quite a few months.
Mm-hmm.
You just want to break it up. So the same way that the people argue with me about the whole scenarios and the PVE, it's exactly the same for the depths. The way they're saying that, oh, it's integral. They use the argument it's integral just because it's got a mine and a thing, but it really is just an instanced PvP dungeon
Yes.
scenario.
PvPvE dungeon
It has
scenario,
a competitive system to it that has its own kind of rewards, but beyond that, it's no different than anything else.
And on
they're
top of
already
that,
doing.
and the people that I usually argue with about the end game scenarios, all I usually bring up is that the fact that they're going to have starting scenarios, you're going to be able to make a new character anyways to do that. So
Yeah.
I don't really
And-
see. I'm hoping they will eventually end up with scenarios, because he did it in Warhammer, he did in Dark Age of Camelot, obviously with Battlegrounds, and they do bring a spice off peak. So I'm all for that. That's why it is a very, very good idea what they're doing for fun, just a general structure with what they're doing. Like I said, I'm not really sure it is really going to speed up the game that much. It will help with certain systems. Say, for example, capping of BOs. They're doing that right now, or guards running to certain points and fighting each other. Them type of systems. But they will have to then translate all of that into the overworld RVR
Yes.
anyways later on. So it's like, and I can understand why they're doing it. Obviously, they want to make it, like you said yourself, Kriss, they want to make it more polished for when beta
Mhm.
people are coming in. And going back to what you were saying about that, it is important, because it is coming up to 5 years and people have been waiting a long time. And then, I mean, there's going to be people that are like upset with what they're going to see, and there'll be some people that'll just
Always.
roll with it.
Yeah, Brand, did you have something you
Always.
wanted to add on that?
Just adding different types of scenarios as a personal. I really want them to fast track the pace of combat and balance early. Huge for that. So I think adding in scenarios where they're forcing class specs, limiting some, where say once they have 5 or 6 of the classes in, they can be like, all of the classes but healer are available to play in this scenario, and they're forcing you to go into certain routes to try to balance different comps, situations without healers, situations with more melee involved, just really kind of mixing and matching, getting not just overall metrics, but specific metrics for team play.
I 100% agree with that. They need to do that as fast as possible, because the problem is, I mean, not just that they're getting in things very fast, so you ended up with what Brand wanted. It's more that I think they need to take a serious look at some of these systems. They seem to have been in like a stalemate with the whole rehabilitation, and there is some things that obviously their first foundation principle, they want to take risks, but I think some of them risks, for example, the body parts systems and things like that, and the ability builder in general, they need to be seriously considering that, like to scrap it as fast as possible.
I'd
So
rather
one
they
after
didn't
it's
scrap
streamlined.
the ability builder. I
No,
really like
I
that
wouldn't
part.
say the ability build. I'd say, if I was talking about the ability build, I would say they need to scale it down so that it's only components that you get rewarded for, rather than every single ability you can build components for. So there is flexibility, but it's not that open, and that obviously hurts with balance as well. The amount of abilities that they're going to think. I mean, Ben, they need to clone Ben. The amount of stuff he's doing. I mean, he's working on bloody art. He's
Yeah.
working on maps. I don't know what the hell they're doing. I mean, they're so short-staffed.
Yeah.
CSA are working very, very hard, but I mean, they need another 10 guys as fast as
Yeah.
possible. Especially coders, they need another guy. They do have guys helping Ben, but they've got their own tasks. But I mean, that's what I meant is in about the scenarios that they're making them like pretty much from scratch and the time
Yeah.
it's taken. I mean, I watched Tyler the other day spend like 2 hours bloody moving some rocks in the thing. Like, I don't know what, obviously that.
They're basically hand painting them.
Yeah.
So they are putting a lot of detail in there, maybe a little too much detail.
What I'd like, in the same vein as Brand's ID, would be a VIP scenario. And the crafter goes to gather materials, and a group of fighters of combatants goes and escort him, and then you have a full 8 men hunting them, and then you have to protect your crafter. But then you would need the crafters in the test.
Yeah, and going back to what I was saying about the systems that you would like, asking the question, like, what systems would you like to see within the game? And obviously the first thing I'd say is when I was talking about the body parts, obviously we're going to have a big paradigm shift in the game when we get healing vision, because the healers are going to play very, very different. So I definitely want, I'm torn between two minds on that, if I would rather just scrap the body part system, even though they said they still want to have a visual heavy game, so that you're still going to be playing the game around you. From what I hear, that they still want to have playing the UI, so you're actually playing in front on the screen rather than clicking bars, even without the body part system. So even if you have your tropish one body part, they still want to have the healing vision aspect. So I definitely want to see that in as fast as possible.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. I mean, I think it's important. I differ with a lot of people in that I still like the idea of the body part system, and I like the idea of testing it and seeing if it can work. But I agree that if they're going to test it, it needs to be soon. It needs to be in the early part of beta, with the healer vision in place and everything, at least a preliminary version of it, so that they can get a real idea of whether or not it's going to work or whether they need to scrap it. For me, scenario-wise, there was one thing I had that kind of interests me, not as something they would need to do early for Beta 1, but just something that I think would be both interesting to vary up some of the content, perhaps interest people, and also test some interesting elements of the UI and identification of targets and things like that in the game, which would be perhaps some sort of a combination scenario that uses automatically generated bounties, as well as perhaps some element of the soul collection mechanic that they've referred to within a scenario itself. Just because I'm really interested to see, one, I think just the soul collection and killing bounties and stuff, it would appeal to people, and they'd have fun doing it, targeting specific people and punishing them and getting retaliation kills and things of that nature. But also, because I think it's important to test some of these UI elements where they identify targets. Because, for instance, like bounty hunting, we have no idea, how does that show up on the screen? How can you tell that someone is a bounty target? And so I would like to see some elements of that showing up in the tests, and see if there's some kind of a scenario where later on, at least, where they can include some of that.
That would probably be something more towards Beta 2.
Probably.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's them type of things. The bounty hunter system would be nice to see, in the souls and things, but I think that's going to be way down the line. I think they've got a hell of a lot more important things that they need to be doing way before then.
Yeah, but it is something that I think can't hold off for too long, because then they've got things like ears. They've got to start working on ears, but then
I ask that every couple of weeks.
How do you differentiate between the highlighting effects and things of ears versus a bounty target versus healer vision? At what point does it just become too much and overloaded?
Yeah, I mean,
then you have air also.
Yeah, exactly. You've got the air that isn't even in yet, and it seems like with the rehabilitation that they've scrapped all that, and they're going to have to like redo the whole thing, and that's going to take a hell of a lot of thing. And going back to the whole balance thing you were talking about, that's going to be a big problem without mages, and then the interaction between healers with archers, the air with that, then the air. I mean, there's so many combinations. They want 20 different damage types on top of that, rather than just the interaction. I mean, it's going to be crazy.
Definitely.
Now, one thing I do wonder about, do you think that as they come out with these scenarios, and as they further develop these scenarios into, like, say, Beta 2, that they might go the route of starting to combine scenarios together so that we don't have as, they've created these scenarios, but then we don't have as many scenarios because they've started to combine some things into similar
In the
scenarios,
overworld.
and that
Mm.
through that process you're really starting to build it into just the game experience because you're starting to combine different sections of the scenarios together.
I think so. For some of them, the caravans, the pop your pop scenario, all have things like that. All have relevant transition into the overworld, and you'll probably start to see more of that taking place. And I kind of hope, I'm not sure yet if they're going to do it or if I'll like them doing it. If they do one scenario at a time, spend a couple weeks focusing on just one scenario, get all the metrics you can with that, then go to the next one, spend a couple weeks doing that, or a month, or however long it's going to take to get them, and just do one at a time to keep current content kind of fresh. And you're not mixing up between 5 or 6 different scenarios and worrying about population for each one. You're just focusing on one thing, getting it done and out of the way, going to the next.
I would be going with another way also. The same thing, doing one scenario at a time. But between those, you do those scenarios during the week, and on the weekend, you combine those. As they move on from one scenario to the next, they add it, like we said, to the overworld, to the general live game that is going to be played. And then on weekends, you test this part, which is half of a stress test and half of how this mechanic works within the environment of the game, and not just one island for a scenario.
Yeah, I just think that for some of these, they could be they seem like they could be pretty easily combined to make it more like a real game test. For instance, the most simple version would be taking the 3 castle scenario, making the map bigger, and putting a place of power in between them. You now have a combination of the place of power and the 3 castle siege. Then you can add siege equipment. You suddenly have combined the siege, the castles, the place of power, and you're really starting to evolve back out into an actual MMO style game a little bit.
Yeah,
I think that'd be pretty easy.
Could go even further and go to maybe like a Thid Ranky from Dagger to Camelot, but you gather the resources at the start, an area in your little safe area, and you've got to control the crafters, and then they can run the caravans, and then you can build like a little tower, and then obviously there's the keep in the middle, where after you build a tower, you're able to build the keep, and it basically it's a smaller version. I mean, some people are not really going to like that because it is kind of it is problematic. That is one thing I wanted to talk about as well, is that people are going to get conditioned by these scenarios. That is definitely going to be a problem with time to kill, resin, any factor you want to take in, the travel times, the instant, I wouldn't say instant gratification, just more like fun at a faster pace. Like you're in there, you're in the mix. Whereas people, that's definitely going to it's going to. Actually, I hope it does corrupt people, because I want scenarios in the game. So
it's kind of a double-edged sword to the concept, where they're trying to give you fun and trying to prevent the burnout, but then people are going to expect that going into live, and it's just going to be an entirely new thing.
I mean, you're going to have to manage that individually.
The fact that you teleport into the scenario and you're in the actions right away. Well, in the live game, you will have the travel time. You will not always be at the center of the action.
Map travel scenario. Ride the hard road for 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen all different types of testers, the solo people, the groups, the thing is, it always happens. There'll be some people that they'll play maybe once a week. And going back to what you were saying, I don't think they should do more than 2 tests personally, well into beta 2. I think they should stick with the 1 test per week, so that the burnout is it's limited. That if people only want to play, and maybe even go into 1 test per month.
That's a good segue into my next question, which was, what ideas or other ideas do you have besides what they've suggested? What ideas do you have for combating the player burnout? What else could they do?
I was going to bring that up. I don't specifically like it because I think it's a privilege to test, especially if you're an IT tester.
Yeah.
But I have to bring up the backer rewards, and hopefully we're going to finally hear about them after coming up to
Soon.
2.5 years. First
Right.
beta,
More than that.
no,
Yeah.
it was 2.5 years. I watched it.
Yeah.
I watched it today. It was because Mark was saying I'm going to get to it next week after the first beta announcement. What Genesee put up,
Yeah.
I was laughing at that. But anyways, rewards and specifically the backer rewards. Personally, I don't really care that much about the founders or I think the rewards that they're going to give these they should give points for testing, for turning up, which they did say they will have planned, and I think they should be
Yes.
important. I think they should be worthy as well. I think they should be up to the standard of the founder points store, because I think personally for me, the time you can't get time
You're-
back, and if you're given time, yeah, whereas refunds are still open. People
Yeah,
haven't.
but
The people say they did risk and they put in their money, but
I would
it's
be
still
okay
like you
with
can
that.
get a refund anytime you want. So I think it should be important that the people that are coming in to test and showing up and given their time, that they should be rewarded. But it's got to be a balance. It's kind of hard if you've got people that are just logging on and then
Yeah.
maybe they're looking at AFK or whatever, then they're farming points to get their
Yeah,
rewards. But rewards.
that's not going to be a very popular opinion because I remember the outcry when Mark tried
we had the whole
put
bill.
out, when Mark tried to put back in the store the founders pack.
That's why I blew up on that thread, because there was people that were whining. Some of the founders like, oh, down the line I might be able to buy that package again. I mean, it's like really it's greedy, and like again, there's the big loophole where founders can just gift founders and then they're automatically a founder, and there's the loophole there which has been exploited a lot, and then they can they can buy the builders tiers anyways. That's why I'm saying these new backer rewards, they need to
not be the same, but being as attractive. Yes.
Yeah, I can't say anything without being a hypocrite because I was gifted a founder pack. So
no, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm laughing at. I am a massive hypocrite on that. Now I put this on the forum. That's why I think it's dirty, because I am now a founder, and I didn't back at I missed the Kickstarter, and I backed after, and obviously I'm an internal tester now with me and me guild. But it is dirty. One of the guys gifted one of the nice founders in the IT. He gifted me a warrior package, and now I'm obviously a founder, and it's like it is very, very dirty, and now I can make anyone else a founder when they start giving out beta codes. You'll turn them into founders. It is problematic, but my point remains is that if I'm a dragon wheel, say if I'm just a dragon wheel, and tomorrow I can get a refund, or I can get a refund before, so the risk is minimal, and the builders have done just as much at this point as the founders have, in my opinion. I mean, we wouldn't have had Mark. We wouldn't have. To be honest, I'd dread to think where things would be, because Mark and George is a massive pivotal point in the whole history of CU so far, because we wouldn't have even had a Seattle studio without him, because Mark went to him to make that, and that was a stretch goal what the builders helped get, and then there was the whole there's a lot of other stuff as well. I mean, the founders are great and the builders are great, but I think the new backer rewards, they need to be strong in ways that to help people test. I don't personally like it because I like it as a privilege and not just giving out here's some cookies to come and test our game. But you do kind of need that in a way. But hopefully it'll be fun enough that they'll bring people anyways.
To me, that would be killing two birds with one stone, because if you gift points to the backers who test the game, you can use that as a testing ground for the realm rewards.
Sure.
Once the game is live, for the metrics to see how you've been active within the game, for at the end of the day getting your XP and your rewards from your realm. So that's another way of testing the game and the codes.
Yeah, for me,
I think the biggest. Go ahead. No,
I was just gonna say. I think for me, one thing. I like the idea of rewarding the backers, the testers, with points and such, as long as the rewards are mostly cosmetic or honorary rewards and things along those lines. But one tact that I think they might employ, besides just rewarding them, is many of the people who have been long-term testers and who are have been actually following the game. I think a lot of us are probably a little bit competitive, and hence why we spend so much time in it. And so I think capitalizing on that to some degree and having like public boards for the testers, and who's been testing the most based on again, not just time logged in sitting there doing nothing,
the amount of bugs
but
you
the
found.
amount of contribution, the amount of active abilities used, all that stuff factoring in, just to go, okay, here's our top 3 testers of the week or whatever, or the top 3 testers of the month. So that they can kind of broadcast that. It kind of appeals to some people's vanity and competitiveness a little bit in a way that may help to encourage some additional activity.
I like Arabacus's idea as well on chat. Get yourself a chance to be a founder, upgrade it, test enough. That's a good idea. So then they've got access to the the point store, save names, guild names, and get all the crafting stuff.
I think the biggest part with Burnout is people play a beta, which tends to be a simulation of the live version, especially in a PvE game where you have quests and zones and you have a progression through those zones. You have to test them. The problem with Burnout for those is you see the whole game and what you're supposed to be doing. You go in once live happens or your early access live, whatever they do.
Which is what
you play for a week, and then you're done. It's like I did all of this in beta, so it was easy to get through. I knew everything I was doing. I've played it. There's nothing too much left to do because I decided to take a week off of work and play. And people leave the game and they get tired of it. I think the scenarios help that to an extent, and especially if you're seeing different scenarios every month or so, while still having the open world.
It's a double-edged sword because if you go into the open world and then you've played the game, like I was saying quite a while back about the like this is going to last a hell of a long time, and you're going to already have seen all the content. The CSA have already said that they want to have everything be very, very open, specs, all the systems. They're not going to hide anything. So you're going to already have people who've got their websites and stuff about builds and things of that nature, YouTubes, Twitches, people. So it's all going to be out there. So like you say, it's going to really come down to how much you really enjoy the game, rather than just like I think it's a good idea with the horizontal progression and stuff like that. Like actually enjoying the combat, doing what you enjoy doing and getting reward for it, rather than just, oh, I've got a pattern. Because that's what happens when you're in like an organized guild. You've got a pattern of when launch day comes. You've got where to go to, what spawn point to go to, what mob to hit at a certain rank or whatever or level, and to get the max fast as possible. And then you start the game for a lot of these hardcore PvP guilds. Whereas with Camelot Unchained, that's the best thing about it. It's like, let's go from day one. It's game time.
Let's do something.
And I think to combat that with the overworld itself is one, come live, the overworld needs to be something we've never seen. To help the Burnout, even though they have access to an overworld in beta, they have the ability to do these maps and the stabilizers. They can have a live version that no one sees until live. They have all the bugs fixed through doing the scenarios and doing the beta overworld. That way, when we get in, no one's been like, okay, we're going to go from here to here to here to here because we know the path, we know the way. Your guides you made in beta are useless at that point.
They can use internal testers to test the real map for glitches and such.
But hopefully they've got enough internal testers to do that and not active people. But what Brent said is it's nice in theory, but in practice it's very
hard to do
because I mean they've got so many interconnected systems with how you're looking at the combat is the top thing for me in this game that they need to get right, and secondary it's the actual place where you're going to be fighting, and they can't just like wait and not show people the overworld with stabilizers. How do they work? The whole work and you build.
Well, you can show them in a more generic island.
Show that in little small pieces.
The actual map itself. Somebody will need to walk through that map to check for clipping, for places. So just send Vellic test that.
I love that stuff. Why not?
If there's a hole in the world, he'll find it.
Yeah, but
You-
for me, it's not really about bugs. It's more about playability, how it
Right.
works. Overpopulated side, how easy it for them to get to the front of the map? How does the map work? How fast
Yeah.
do boats travel? Can I go from island to island with boats? Am I
Yeah.
able to hit the back line? If there's 4 connected enemy islands on the Viking overpopulated realm, am I able to break the middle island rather than having to go more linear to break the one to the right of it before I can go to the central piece? Basically, you want to be able to scatter the enemy all
Yeah.
over the place, and that is going to need to be tested in depth for a long
Yeah, of
time
course.
before the game goes live. So,
Perhaps an easier solution,
go.
kind of bridging both of those, one the concern into the idealistic view of that is the map is basically the same, the islands are the same, but they pull a fast one and suddenly everyone has rotated their starting island so that you are on, say, the Vikings starting
help
island
some.
that was in beta, but now they're on yours and they just switch and rotate. You start
Yeah,
from the other side of the map.
It could work if they do like a mini scaled down overworld version, like we were talking about earlier. So you've got 3. Let's say there's a fairly large scenario like Thidranki, like I used the example. You've got your 3 starting areas. You can control caravans to the middle. Then you've got the keep, and then you can battle over the keep, and then but it's separated in the 3 starting islands, and then they, like you said, they rotate, they come together, they move a little bit, or however they're going to use it. So you're experiencing every little bit of the overworld in small
Right.
periods, basically, not seeing the whole thing. But I still think it's quite risky to do it that way
Yeah.
because there's a lot of things that could crop up.
Yeah, I will say that I don't think. Certainly, there's always some risk, and there's always going to be some level of burnout. I actually don't think we'll have as much of a problem with the beta to live game, post live game burnout, as much as just the burnout of people while they're going through the testing, because it's not a PVE game. I think you really get that really badly in the PVE games. There'll certainly be an element of it in this game, as there are in all games, where you get early testing. But in the PVE games, where I think it's especially bad, because you know the grind spots, you know the quests by that point, you've done the story, you've gone through all this content that's laid out, and then we had a similar problem in Star Wars: The Old Republic. We beta tested the living crap. Our guild got early access into testing. We went in like the whole stretch, just testing continually throughout beta, and then the game came out, and we had a certain host of people. They've done the entire storyline of the entire game by that point. They came out, they crammed through it, as we tend to do in competitive guilds, in the first 2 weeks of launch to get out into the raids and high level and everything.
In 3 days, and then stop a couple weeks later.
And then after about 2 months, went, God, this game is boring. Well, no shit.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
We had the same problem in ESO. We had the first max level in the US in the guild, who in 72 hours was max level or something like that. I don't remember how long it took him, but he was the first in the US, and then 3 weeks to 2 months later, he quit the game because he had done everything.
Yeah. Prior to one of ours on the EU, we played ESA. He was one of the first. I think he was second. He was the first to get the the max rank when you're in RVR. What was the special title or whatever you would get when you had the special powers? He was the first one to get that on the EU server.
Veteran.
Basically going back to what you were saying.
The Emperor.
I mean, Emperor. That was it. Well, he was the first on the EU with the Emperor. Going back to what you were saying. I mean, I agree completely. I mean, we've been in the testing now for about 4 years, and some of my guys, they want to wait until beta 1, and then probably when beta 1, we'll probably play 1 day a week. But then we won't. People will take a break, people will rotate, some people will come in and out, some people will just like wait even further down the line. And I mean, that's being honest, I think a lot of people will do that there will be gaps in these testing phases. Beta 1 might start, it's always the same. The general average is like, oh, I'm really, really hyped to play beta 1 for let's say 1 to 2 months, so like 6 to 8 SNS phases per weekend, so 6 to 8 weekends, and then people they'll wear off. And it's also going to be that you get the problem that people are seeing how fast CSC are working, and then they're trying to keep up the pace, and then people get bored with the lack of progress that's being made over that period. So then they stop, and then they'll wait until beta 2, and then they'll come back. So there's definitely going to be things. The one thing else, what you were saying about when we were talking about rewards, another thing I want to see is CSC-led events specific
Yes.
events within the tests to bring like just a random event, and also maybe something along the lines of whoever wins whichever group, or whoever got the most kills in that scenario he gets 20 founders points or something along them lines, like little prizes or whatever, like just
And
to spice things up.
that's why I want them to do a scenario progression through beta. Start with one. They can.
Yeah.
I know they're already working on the second scenario as of last week or something.
Yeah.
They really need to, I think, just focus on one. Use the time of them doing the metrics for that one to work on the second one, and just give
When they have
themselves time to go
when
one
they
at
have their
another.
metrics, yeah.
Right. Well, while we're testing the first one, they can be building the second one.
Yeah.
And then while we're testing the second one, they can be building the third one, because it takes some time. Once they've built the first one, I think there's going to be a lot of transition from the first to the second as far as artwork goes. So we'll probably see them come out a little faster.
Yeah.
But I want to see them progress through there so that we can go and just kind of look at one thing, test it, and then to help with the burnout, take a week or 2 weeks off, maybe do a weekend testing in between there. And then they introduce the next one, and then we all kind of go to that, and we're not even thinking about the first one anymore. And then maybe they'll bring it back later and help refresh the cycle.
Yeah, they're going to need a variation quite fast, but they have got the problem with the assets, like with Crowfall, where they went from Hunger Dome to Siege Perilous, and then to the Overworld within a couple of months periods, and then they took a period off, and then they to bring that up. I'm not sure what CSE can do that fast to keep up with the pace, because they're building it all from scratch. And I mean, it's hit and miss. We'll have to see how it goes, and obviously with the highs and things like of that nature. But yep, I guess so.
One of the things that I would really like to see that I think could help with some of the testing burnout is if they make, perhaps not all of them, because some of them are pretty dependent on how things are set up. But if they take some of the scenarios and make them so that they're able to be adapted and swapped out with regards to terrain, so that you're not always necessarily in the exact same map for this given terrain. That always freshens up PvP. When you're in a different scenario, different terrain for whatever you're doing. And for some things, I would think that wouldn't be too difficult to arrange.
Shouldn't be.
Even the place of power battle. I mean, I would think they could effectively take the plot where the place of power is and just position that as a unit onto some other type of map that was created to have a space for it.
Yeah, they showed the next scenario on the stream. Tyler was showing it. It's going to have the place of power in the middle, and then there'll be I think 4 to 6 cap points, and then
it's basically like the Friday night fight.
Dragon. Yeah, pretty much like the Friday night fight with a big thing in the middle, with like BOs, basically a cap in one.
Yeah, and Burnout at that point, as you mentioned, is just basically seeing new content. If you can see new content on a relatively quick pace, but long enough for you get to enjoy it, I think Burnout will be minimalized, and that extends through live too. If they want to hold back some of the things they've talked about till after live, for the sake of adding in fresh content like the depths we talked about earlier, things like that will help keep the Burnout going through that and past it, minimalized and people engaged in the game longer.
I agree with Rick. I think it's more individual. For me, I mean, I don't really care. Yes, it's going to be nice to play in a different type of scenario, a different situation, like the caravans or the BO capping or the fighting NPCs sieging, but it's going to come down to combat and the amount of classes that they have, how the classes are progressing. For me, if it's basically just the same class of very little variation and it's not really showing flexibility as it goes along, it'll definitely get I'll definitely get burned out or bored a lot faster than just swapping scenarios or the place you're going to be fighting in. The game has to progress. The crafting, the general, all the elements need to come together faster. What I like to see is literally all the elements coming in as fast as possible, even in their basic first prototype phase, as fast as possible, so that you can get an overall view of where things are going to go.
I think the PvP itself needs to have variance with the systems to avoid PvP burnout, because you saw it with ESO with their siege takings and all that. It got very repetitive very quickly, and I think having a wide array of different types of points and, in this case, scenarios, for live in the open world, just a whole bunch of different small funnels to push people into different areas of PvP, not just environmentally, but actual mechanics and things to do will help keep that more fresh and from getting stale too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they need to get that in as fast as possible, the whole building system, and having a middle area where, for example, you can get, they need to just share all this information about how the building system is going to work, the restrictions, the size of people's different body, how you can build, how many blocks you get, how the king gives out the actual way you can build your
Honestly, I don't think
buildings.
they know
Yeah,
yet.
I'm always
huts.
having these debates about with Necromaniac about, because I mean, what a builder's going to be doing exactly? Whereas
Oh, he's never going to be able to
How-
build the things he is building
Yeah.
we're
right
going to
now.
defend his ass and he'll be building them perfectly fine, supplying them all their mats. But yeah, no, that's one thing they need to do. Like the scenario they've got
Yeah.
now, the scenario 1, that needs to be a cube building in the middle of that, where you can knock it down. Building destruction, how does it work in terms of the performance? Is it going to be able to handle it? There's a lot of questions
Mhm.
still to be answered on that regard. There's a lot of systems that are way far behind. I mean, the progression system, we haven't even started that hardly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does anybody have any other thoughts about the combating of the testing burnout?
Well, as Sakrix mentioned, having short test phases for one update and then waiting to have added more stuff in the build to start the next batch of testing. Like say, you test a week, you have a week off where you add a bunch of stuff in your build and then test again, rather than having 3-4 weeks, 3 months of the same build just fixing bugs. Fixing bugs is good, but you need to add content because that's going to combat the burnout also.
It will
Yeah, no
certainly
sense
help
of
that we're
burnout.
not having continual throughout the week testing as well, because
Yes.
that's the surefire
No.
way to burn out everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1 day
I
per
would-
week, and also the difference between like I said earlier, the normal test where you're fighting versus people in the scenario, and then the ones where they want to do the stress test. That's when they super load it with bots, so people have got the decision if they want to turn up for that one, because that can burn people out. I mean, I hate
Yeah.
the bot test. I hate like Siege, because you're not really testing
No.
that much right now. It just
I
gets
would
boring.
I would like to see them keep the open world or the overworld open for a duration of while they're there in the office. Say, like if they picked a Wednesday, the entire day they're there, the overworld is just open for people to be on. Not really testing something specific. That's where they can do their bots, and not just the 200 v200 v200, but the 2,000 bots plus players who happen to be on, just kind of messing around, testing whatever they can, and then close it. And then for a weekend testing, do these scenarios where they can
Yep,
have the focus
100%.
metrics.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday have the server open so people can bind their key bindings. That's where the in-depth, you meet players that are just playing.
Yeah.
You might do a little bit of PvP. The guy says log on a Viking. He comes with Viking. You've got an Arthurian. You're having a little fight. You're testing abilities. That's where that type of stuff happens
Right.
in the mix. Like on the off-peak hours, that's definitely something that they need to have as well.
All right, we
But
had
just when they're spooling up these servers and saying jump in or whatever, then people are clicking abilities because the key binders weren't working or things like that. It's yeah, that needs to be fixed for sure.
yeah. All right, we've covered some really important topics. We're running kind of late on time, so I do want to bring us back with one final softball question, as is our usual practice. What MMO would you say that you have most enjoyed testing, and why?
SWOTOR, Hutball,
Because we kicked ass. Is that why?
because I broke
People
the
rage quit
shit
when we
out
got into
of that
Battlegrounds.
Yeah, the things I could do with my class in Hutball that
That's true.
I saw them make visual changes to the map because of what I was doing or what people
yeah.
of my class, not just me. I won't take all the credit for it.
Just in 70%.
Being able to force them to make changes because of how broken I was making it or other people like me were making it was extremely fun. And I like the competitiveness of Hutball. I know a lot of people hate kind of how that worked. I just enjoyed it. It was very competitive for me.
You could force speed jump over that gap. We didn't intend that.
Over all the
Put a wall there.
all the things I could do is like people are like, how'd you do that? You're cheating. It's like I'm not. I'm really not.
You showed me
Just
a few
using the
things.
abilities. Yeah. No, I actually, strangely enough, it was already a mostly complete game when they ported it to the West. But the Archage Alpha, uh, we saw some changes, and the community was great. It was actually the game was more enjoyable during the alpha than the launch, so that's probably one of the games I've enjoyed testing the most. EQ, I haven't tested it long enough to really say was the most enjoyable. It's still my most enjoyable MMO, because it's the first I've played. But um, the testing itself, I didn't know what I was doing, so I might have found bugs. I've reported. I remember reporting a bunch of stuff that I'm fairly sure were not bugged. That was just most people not understanding what MMOs were and what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, I think it's probably hit and miss for me. I mean, I've tested a lot of games quite hardcore as well. Obviously the Warhammer, I enjoyed the Warhammer, but I would have to say, even without the stupid shit that happened in the Guild Wars 2 internal testing with some of the devs or whatever, and the fact that they just didn't give a shit about World v World, and you're trying to test it and they just didn't care because they were all focused on esports and things like that with the SPVP. And there was quite a few Red Guard in the internal testing for Guild Wars 2, but not many people played. I was pretty much like the only one and maybe another two guys. So we were playing a lot with the French Guild Origin Online, and they used to have like
They're huge.
open tests, and it was quite fun fighting them with just a couple of guys. So it was fun if you just took it on the whole aspect of like enjoying the game, not having to deal with like all the dev drama that happened when you want to care about a game mode that you like and you're going to play it, and then the devs just like have no interest and understanding of the actual game area that they're making. It's that causes problems. Whereas obviously we're not going to have that problem with Camelot Unchained because, yep, all open RVR, all good.
Yeah, in chat we've got Terra. I see some Arcage, EQ. For me, I did enjoy Star Wars: The Old Republic testing, just primarily because one, Hubball was awesome, but also because we were such a beast in the testing for PvP that was ridiculously enjoyable. I mean, when people rage quit as soon as you get into a battleground, that's just satisfying. But for me, the most enjoying one would have to be actually Guild Wars 1, and for a very simple reason, which actually reflects Brand's reason. Guild Wars 1 was the... I'm getting feedback from somebody's microphone, by the way. Yeah, hear myself in speakers, it sounds like. Guild Wars 1 was the first game I ever tested where... I won't say I saw a direct impact from my testing in the game, but where I discovered something that was obviously an issue, and they did remove it from the game. It was probably reported by other people as well. But you know, when testing that game, I had found essentially an area of the map that either they planned to scrap, and this when I found it, it was actually right before launch. But either they planned to scrap or they had just completely forgotten it existed. I don't know. But there was lots of terrain and lots of stuff, but no mobs and nothing to do there. It was just this little bitty alcove that would open into this big ruin, and you'd go out there, and I was like, this is a really cool area. I was actually a little bit disappointed in a live game because I was like, this would be good for like role play or social interactions and stuff. And I went back later on because I'd reported it. I was like, this place is super empty. What's going on here? It's just this little hidden alcove that, again, you wouldn't find unless you were just randomly exploring the map. And I found it and happened into it, and I was like, what the hell's going on here? And then got in the live game, and I was like, oh, that spot is totally gone. There was a mountain there now. They had just covered it over.
It's probably still there.
There were a few.
Covered it.
Yeah, but
there were a few spots like that in Outrage also where you would, because in Outrage when you were planting stuff to grow rare materials, people would come and kill you and take your crops, and they would take hours to grow. So people were finding spots at the edges of the map glitching through parts of the map to go plant their stuff where nobody could reach or nobody could see it. And that was really fun to try. Try
Yeah.
finding spots that nobody would think about going there, knowing that there's something that's costing a fortune once you gather it, and it's planted there.
It's
I'd
always
have to say Rift as well. I forgot about Rift. Rift was a good game in beta, but the problem is it didn't really reflect how it would be in live, because the more small scale, large scale in the beta played completely different in the live game on the launch, especially with the engine and the lag and stuff. So there is kind of a problem there when you're playing betas, can give a different view of certain games to what you actually experience when it comes to live.
Yeah, I think for me, and perhaps for other people, if I can make the assumption, I think probably the most actually satisfying beta experiences are when you feel like you actually do have some kind of an impact and make some kind of an effect on the game. When
very fun.
You know, I report bugs, and that's a thing, and then to see the bug fixed is nice. But for the most part, if I find a bug, I assume 5,000 other people have reported that bug. You know, it's like, here's a drop from me and the 100 other people that reported this. But when there are demonstrable things you can see in the game and go like, oh, I may not be the cause of that, but I'm gonna say I am anyway.
But yeah.
I like the communication about that as well. It hasn't happened to me in other games, but in CU, I've seen it going on with other people as well, including myself, where we've crashed the server a couple of times a couple weeks ago, and it was mentioned on stream, and we're doing a lot of talking with Brian, especially, and that's nice on my end, and I'm sure on a lot of our ends, to get the recognition for destroying their servers and doing all this stuff, and just to have that communication with them about them wanting us to do that, and just talking with us in general while we're testing. It's enjoyable. This is a very enjoyable current phase of things with Brian especially being.
I completely agree with everything you're saying. A massive shout out to Brian, because I mean I talk to Brian pretty much like every couple of days. He's great with the IT people as well. I mean, there was a long period there where there was absolutely fucking nothing happening, and he's been trying to organize people. He's there. He's telling people if there's going to be a test before some of the CSA would just go away, like when they were having dinner or whatever. They wouldn't even say the test is finished. He's there. He's telling us what's going on, when there's going to be a test, if the test is going to be not there or not. Like, I think you were talking about Strike when he was dropping like 500 seats. I wasn't trying to crash this. But no, Brian has been awesome. He's really been a breath of fresh air in terms of how the testing's been compared, especially from the last CM.
Agree there.
Yeah, it actually kind of it actually just reminded me of one of the forum topics I made ages ago that I won't say was 100% well received, as some of mine aren't. Which was that kind of suggesting one thing I would like to see, and I think this is the sort of thing that would work well with the topic we were discussing earlier of like the developers doing special events that might even have special acknowledgments for players and things. But having the beta tests almost written into the game lore to some degree, where, you know, if they had a special developer run event and we get 300 players in testing stuff or whatever it is, and do a huge siege battle or something, have that actually organized in a scenario, and then when the game goes live, there's actually like a ruined castle or something that is named in some fashion that we would recognize and go, hey, that was the thing. Or there's a lore book somewhere that just has the battle of blah 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 blah. There's the name of the scenario we did, and we're like, hey, I was there at the thing. That's cool.
That's one of the things I'm actually pretty proud about is at the end of the phase of the beta test of PvP and ESO.
Yeah,
there was a huge siege. There was a huge siege in Chalman outpost that we named because it was two realms against the Ebonheart, and if I remember correctly, and I was part of that thing, and it became so popular that it was written into the lore, the Chalamo, where you had like
The Chalamo.
Yeah, they named it the Chalamo because of Chalman Outpost. It was six
Remember the
players
Chalamo.
holding off 25 to 30 players outside, and they held them for like an hour almost. It was awesome. It was probably the most enjoyable PvP experience I've had in a long time, and it was written into the lore. They wrote in Chalman Outpost. You have a book about that event.
Anything along them lines is always going to spice things up along with trying to get more people into testers as well. Because I think they should use the promotional videos from the actual fights that go on, and maybe get a few certain well-known people or guilds to like have different recordings of a certain battle, and having like the three realms, like a couple of guys from each realm, like like trash talking, like the Eve trailer basically, where they're actually showing the real games of the game to promote the beta phases, like the
Yeah, that'd be
special
cool.
events, like they're gonna do.
If they were hiring a video editor, that would be something that would be totally a cool thing.
Yeah,
except that they're not, because I've tried.
Yeah, I think Brian's going to start doing more stuff on
You've
that
only
end. I mean,
clung onto the leg and go,
the production
please.
value is pretty bad.
Please, yes.
Well, we've had some good topics and some good conversation on these. I do thank all of you. Thank you, Sacrix, for coming on and joining us. Thanks, everybody, for coming and hanging out with us. We will, as usually, be back in 2 weeks to do another topic. I don't know what topic is right now. I've got it listed, but I don't want to pull it up right now. So I will let you know after I end the recording. But thanks for coming out. If you're reviewing the video afterwards, thanks for checking it out. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and all that kind of stuff.
And like the video.
And try to come in for one of the live episodes. Until then.
That too.
Yeah, why the hell are you not here on the live? Why not here live?